You know, there's a quiet truth that most people never hear out loud. And it's this: no one has ever truly hurt you. Not in the way you think. What hurt you was the story you told yourself about what happened. What lingered was the version of yourself that believed it had no choice but to suffer. I know that may sound like a stretch, maybe even unfair, but stay with me for a moment, not in your head, but in your breath. You see, there was a time in my life when I thought freedom meant escaping pain. I thought if I just figured things out, worked harder, read enough books, met the right people, maybe then life would stop hurting me. But it never did. Until one quiet afternoon, I stopped running. Not because I gave up, but because I finally realized there was nowhere to run to. I sat still for what felt like the first time in years. And as the world kept spinning, something in me went silent. A silence that didn't feel empty. It felt ancient, like the kind of stillness that lives under the ocean, beneath the waves of everything you thought you needed to control. And from that silence, I saw it so clearly. It wasn't the world that hurt me. It was me forgetting that I am not the world. You see, we've been taught to live backwards. We think our peace comes from things going right. We think we'll feel safe when people treat us kindly, when life meets our expectations, when nothing shakes us. But that's not peace. That's dependence. True peace, the kind that makes you untouchable, doesn't come from controlling life. It comes from remembering who you are beneath the life you're trying to control. You're not here to dodge every hardship. You're here to remember that no hardship can define you. You're not here to fight your circumstances. You're here to wake up from the illusion that circumstances hold your power. And when you begin to see in this way, really see, it's as if the whole world exhales with you. You stop trying to swim against the river, and instead, you realize you are the river. You are the awareness watching every rise and fall. The silence between the thoughts, the sky behind the weather. No one teaches us this. Not in school, not in most families, not in the media, but here it is. In its simplest form, you are not your pain. You are not your past. You are not the identity that was shaped by other people's chaos. You are the witness, the chooser, the creator of how this moment lives inside you. And here's the miracle. When you remember this, not just with your mind, but with your being, the pain stops being personal. The struggle stops being punishment. The world stops being your enemy. And something profound unfolds. Life doesn't hurt in the same way anymore. Not because it's become easier, but because you've stopped abandoning yourself in the middle of it. You start to see every reaction, every emotional spiral, every fear as a doorway, a quiet invitation to return to the seat of your power. That's the shift. That's the moment life becomes yours again. Not when you figure it all out, but when you remember you were never meant to be figured out. You were meant to be witnessed, held, and freed. So if no one's told you this before, let me say it clearly. You don't need to become stronger. You need to become stiller. You don't need to protect yourself more. You need to remember who you are beneath the part that thinks it needs protection. Because when you stop and simply witness, you'll feel it. That gentle hum underneath all the noise. That's you. Always has been. And from there, you can begin to live again. Not as someone at the mercy of life, but as someone who breathes life into everything they touch. Welcome back. 1. Meaning doesn't come from the event. It comes from you, you know. Sometimes it's not what happened that hurts us. It's what we told ourselves it meant. Maybe someone didn't reply to your message. Hours passed. Then a day, and something in your chest began to ache, not because of the silence itself, but because of what you imagined that silence to say about you. Maybe they don't care. Maybe I've done something wrong. Maybe I'm not important to them. And just like that, the mind weaves a story, not because it wants to harm you, but because it's trying to protect you from the unknown. It's trying to make sense of the gap, to fill in the silence with something, even if that something hurts. But here's the truth, no one taught most of us. That gap doesn't have to mean anything. Not unless you give it meaning. You see, life is full of empty moments, neutral events, a glance, a message, a delay, a change of tone. None of these things are inherently good or bad, they simply are. They hold no power until your consciousness interacts with them and assigns them meaning. And the meaning you assign, that becomes your experience of reality. That's how powerful you are. You're not just the one receiving life, you're the one interpreting it, coloring it, giving it shape. And if you don't like the way it feels, you can choose to shift the meaning, not by denying your feelings, but by meeting them with compassion and asking, is this story I'm telling helping me or hurting me? Sometimes, the same unanswered message that made you feel abandoned could become your reminder to release the need for external validation, to trust that your worth is not measured by someone else's response time, to return to yourself instead of chasing someone else's attention. You see, that's the sacred opportunity hidden inside every small disappointment. Not to change the world, but to meet the moment differently, to stop assuming the worst about yourself, to stop letting outside silence dictate your inner voice. Think of it like this. You are the author of your experience, but if you hand your pen to everyone else, you'll live a story you didn't write. And most people are doing just that. They let someone else's bad mood become a statement about their worth. They let one criticism rewrite their self-image. They let circumstances dictate their emotional state without realizing they're living in a house of mirrors, reacting to reflections they themselves created. But here's the miracle. You can take the pen back gently, humbly. You can pause before the story takes hold and ask, what else could this mean? What if it's not rejection but redirection? What if it's not abandonment but an invitation to stand on my own? This isn't about pretending everything's fine. It's not about slapping a smile over your sadness. It's about realizing you don't have to believe every meaning your mind creates. You can sit beside your pain without making it a prophecy. You can feel disappointment without turning it into a declaration of unworthiness. The shift is quiet, but it's powerful, like watching a storm outside and realizing you're not the storm, you're the sky that holds it. So next time something doesn't go your way, instead of rushing to label it, fix it, or fear it, pause, breathe. Ask yourself, what's the kindest meaning I can give this moment? Not the most clever, not the most analytical, just the kindest, the most compassionate. Because here's the thing, life will keep happening. People will still be late. Messages will still go unanswered. Some things will still fall apart. But when you learn to choose your meaning, you become unshakable. Not because the world gets easier, but because your inner world stops depending on it. And that's freedom. Not the kind that comes from escaping pain, but the kind that comes from knowing you are no longer at the mercy of it. 2. Triggers are not punishment. They're loving reminders. There was a time in my life when I thought being triggered meant I was broken. When someone said something that hit a nerve, I'd flinch, close up, or lash out. I used to think it meant something was wrong with me, or wrong with them. But over the years, after enough heartbreaks, silent drives, and late-night conversations with my own soul, I began to see it differently. Now, when something stings, I pause it, because I've come to understand that pain is not punishment. It's guidance. It's the soul's way of gently, or sometimes not so gently, tapping you on the shoulder and whispering, there's something here that needs your love. You see, when someone pushes your buttons, they're not creating your pain. They're revealing where it already lives inside you. It's like sunlight streaming through a cracked window. You don't see the dust until the light shines in. And the people who trigger us, they're the light. Uncomfortable, yes, but illuminating. That doesn't mean what they said or did was okay. It doesn't mean you have to tolerate cruelty, or excuse bad behavior. But it does mean you get to reclaim your power by seeing that your reaction isn't about them. It's about you and a part of you that's ready to be seen, felt, and finally healed. Triggers aren't enemies. They're invitations. They say, here's a part of you that was hurt once. Here's a belief you picked up when you were too young to question it. Here's a wound that's asking to be met, not with judgment, but with presence. And that's where the transformation begins. You stop being afraid of being hurt, because you realize that the hurt isn't coming from now. It's echoing from before. Someone ignores your opinion, and it echoes the feeling of being overlooked as a child. Someone criticizes you, and it echoes the voice of an old authority figure who taught you that love had to be earned. Someone leaves, and it echoes the moment you first felt abandoned. It's not the current event that breaks you. It's the unhealed meaning still living inside you. But here's the good news. If the pain is coming from within, then so is the healing. And when you meet those triggers with awareness, instead of resistance, you begin to change your relationship with them. You stop seeing them as signs of weakness. You start seeing them as signals of readiness. Readiness to grow, to let go, to soften, to finally stop holding your breath every time someone doesn't behave the way you hoped they would. I remember one moment vividly years ago. Someone I trusted said something sharp. It wasn't even about me, but it landed hard. My chest tightened. My mind raced. I wanted to defend, to correct, to withdraw. But instead, I just sat, and I asked, what is this showing me? Not what they need to fix, but what I need to feel. And what came up was a very old fear, a voice in me that said, maybe I'm not safe if I'm misunderstood. I breathed with it. I didn't try to argue with it or push it away. And for the first time, instead of fighting the trigger, I listened. Not to them, but to me. That moment didn't change the world, but it changed mine. So if something or someone is triggering you today, I invite you to ask not, why is this happening to me? But rather, what part of me is asking to be loved right now? You'll be surprised at what surfaces when you stop judging your emotions and start welcoming them. Because emotion at its core is just energy in motion. It rises. It speaks. It asks to be heard. And once it's heard without shame, it starts to soften. Like a child who finally feels safe enough to cry in your arms. So no, you're not being punished. You're being shown. The question is, are you willing to look? Because the more you do, the less power those old patterns have. The less you fear being hurt again, and the more gratitude you feel for what once made you flinch. That's the real gift of spiritual growth. Not that you stop getting triggered, but that you stop getting trapped by it. You move through life like water, still flowing, still feeling, but no longer clinging. You become someone who can hold pain without becoming it. Someone who can welcome discomfort without letting it define them. And eventually, you begin to smile, not because everything is perfect, but because you finally understand every trigger was just a breadcrumb, leading you home. 3. Emotions aren't automatic. You create them through the frequency of your awareness. Most people don't realize they have a choice. They feel something: fear, frustration, sadness, and they assume it's just the natural result of whatever just happened. Someone cuts them off in traffic, and anger appears. They get passed over for an opportunity, and resentment takes over. A friend doesn't respond the way they hoped, and they spiral into self-doubt. And it feels automatic, doesn't it? Like your emotions are reflexes hardwired, out of your control. Like life is pulling the strings, and all you can do is react. But here's something I wish someone had told me years ago. Your emotions are not just reactions, they are reflections. Reflections of the frequency you're tuned into beneath the surface. And that frequency, that's something you can choose. It took me a long time to see this. For a long time, I believed I was at the mercy of my feelings. If I woke up and the sky was gray, I felt low. If someone praised me, I felt valuable. If someone dismissed me, I felt invisible. It was exhausting living on the emotional roller coaster of cause and effect. But one day, after a long, quiet walk, something shifted. I remember watching a leaf floating down a stream, so effortless, so surrendered, and something in me softened. Because I realized I'd been trying to control the stream of life while refusing to notice the water I was swimming in was dyed by my own perception. Let me explain. Two people can experience the same event, a canceled plan, a delay, a sharp word. One feels powerless. The other feels at peace. One feels rejected. The other feels redirected. It's not the situation that's different. It's the inner state from which they're interpreting it. Your emotions rise from the meaning you assign. But even deeper than that, they rise from the frequency you're inhabiting. Are you operating from lack, fear, and defense, or from presence, trust, and openness? Think of your awareness like a radio dial. If you're tuned to a frequency of not enough, then even neutral events will sound like criticism. If you're tuned to I'm not safe, then the slightest tension will feel like a threat. But if you're tuned to a higher frequency, one of peace, compassion, or curiosity, then that same moment might feel like nothing at all, or even a gift. This is not spiritual bypassing. It's not pretending you're okay when you're not. It's about learning to notice the space between what happens and how you interpret what happens. It's about realizing you're not a puppet to your past. You're a powerful broadcaster of energy, and your state of being shapes what gets reflected back to you. I've had days where everything went wrong and I still felt centered. And I've had days where nothing went wrong, yet I still felt off. What changed wasn't the world. It was me, my inner weather, my baseline, my chosen frequency. And here's what's beautiful. When you shift your state, your emotions follow. You don't have to fight them or suppress them. You just raise the floor you're standing on, and suddenly, the same old events feel completely different. It's like putting on new glasses. The world doesn't change, but the way you see it does. And that changes everything. So the next time you feel overwhelmed, or triggered, or low, pause. Not to fix, not to force, but to ask gently, what frequency am I tuned into right now? And is there a higher one available to me? Even here. Because there always is. Even in pain, there's a frequency of self-compassion. Even in confusion, there's a frequency of stillness. Even in fear, there's a frequency of trust. Soft, quiet, but waiting to be noticed. You are not your emotions. You are the awareness choosing which current to step into. And each moment, each breath, is an invitation to tune again. So no, emotions aren't automatic. They're created by the lens you wear, by the story you tell, by the frequency you feed. And when you start creating them with intention, with care, you'll begin to experience a life that doesn't just look better, it feels like home. 4. You don't need to control life, you need to return to the still center within. There's a kind of peace that doesn't come from everything finally going right. It's not the kind you get after checking off all the boxes, fixing all the problems, or making sure everyone around you is okay. It's a different kind of peace, a quiet one, a stillness that doesn't arrive after the storm has passed, but exists within the storm itself. The ancient teachers spoke of it often. They called it the unmoving center, the eye of the hurricane, the silent witness that remains untouched, even as the winds howl and the world seems to spin out of control. It sounds poetic, until life throws something hard at you, until the diagnosis comes, until the person leaves, until the plans unravel, one by one. And suddenly, all the spiritual quotes you've read feel far away. All the meditations, all the books, they vanish in the panic of the moment. I've been there, not once, many times, And what I learned painfully, slowly, but deeply is this: you will never find lasting peace by trying to control everything outside of you. Because the world will never stop moving. People will never stop being unpredictable. Life will never stop being life. But what can change, what must change, is where you choose to live inside yourself. Imagine for a moment that you are an ocean. At the surface, waves rise and fall, tides shift, storms come, boats pass. It's never still up there, never fully predictable. But if you drop beneath the surface, go deep enough, there is a calm that never left, a depth that is unaffected by the noise above. That's what I mean when I say, you don't need to control life. You need to return to the still center within. And the beautiful truth, that center, has always been there. It's not something you need to earn. It's not some final destination after years of spiritual work. It's not about becoming cold, distant, or indifferent. It's about remembering that you are not the waves. You are the water, that you are not the chaos. You are the awareness that sees it. That beneath the fear, beneath the anxiety, beneath the stories your mind spins to try and feel safe, there is a presence in you that is untouched. And from that presence, something miraculous happens. You stop needing to fight with life. You stop needing everyone to behave. You stop needing the world to slow down. You stop bracing for the next blow. Because you found something stronger than control. You found trust. Not the naive kind that hopes everything will always be easy, but the quiet kind that knows even when it isn't, you are still okay. Let me be clear, this isn't about apathy. It's not about surrendering your voice or your power. It's not about becoming passive in the face of injustice or pain. It's about shifting your point of origin. Instead of reacting from fear, you respond from presence. Instead of grasping, you breathe. Instead of spiraling, you root down into that place inside you that nothing can shake. When you live from this center, people can still disappoint you, but they don't define you. Plans can still fall through, but they don't destroy your peace. The world can still be loud, but your silence is deeper. It's not always easy. It takes practice. Sometimes it takes falling apart again and again until you finally ask, what if I don't need to hold everything together? And the moment you stop holding, the moment you let go of trying to fix it all, you feel it, that stillness. Not as a concept, but as a truth inside your chest. A calm that doesn't depend on circumstances. A strength that doesn't need armor. A peace that doesn't come and go with the tides. And once you taste it, you'll know. This is what the mystics were pointing to. Not escape. Not perfection, but presence, that you just as you are in this breath, in this body, in this moment, are enough. The world may swirl around you, but you are home, and no one can take that away. 5. You are communicating with the quantum field through every emotion you send out. There's something quietly miraculous happening inside you all the time, and you may not even realize it. Every thought you hold, every feeling you allow, every emotional vibration you rest in, whether love or fear, joy or resentment, isn't just something happening in you. It's something you're sending out. Into what? Exactly into the field. The quantum field, the unseen space around you that responds not to your words, but to your frequency. This isn't wishful thinking. It's not mystical fluff. It's physics. We now understand, even scientifically, that everything is energy. And that includes you, your body, your breath, your thoughts, your emotions, all vibrating energy. And energy, by nature, is communicative. It interacts. It ripples. It reflects. When you feel love, not the romantic kind, but the soft kind, the kind that simply accepts your radiating coherence, you're creating a signal of harmony. When you feel gratitude, you're resonating with the frequency of abundance, even if nothing has changed on the outside yet. And every time you return to that state, even for a moment, you are not only affecting yourself, you're shaping the way reality echoes back to you. I used to think reality was fixed, a series of random events that I just had to survive, manage, or hope turned out well. But over time, I started noticing patterns, subtle, but undeniable. When I woke up anxious, rushed, already preparing for stress, the day followed suit. Little things went wrong. Conversations felt off. The world met my inner turmoil with its own noise. But on the rare days I woke up slowly with presence, with softness. Even with a moment of breath and stillness, life felt different. People were kinder. Solutions came faster. The day moved differently. And I realized it wasn't the world that changed. It was my signal, my broadcast. Because the quantum field, this energetic matrix we live in, doesn't respond to what you say you want. It responds to what you are. You can say, "I want peace." But if you're vibrating resentment, the field reflects back more tension. You can beg for love. But if your baseline is fear, the signal is scrambled. The field is like a mirror. It doesn't judge. It doesn't decide what's fair. It simply reflects. And your emotions, they are your settings. They calibrate your experience. It's why choosing love, not the sentimental kind, but the conscious kind, is one of the most powerful decisions you can make. Not because it's noble, but because it's magnetic. Love is the highest resonance we have access to. It organizes energy. It draws order out of chaos. It communicates to the field. This is what I am available for. This is what I embody. And the field in time responds. This doesn't mean life will suddenly become perfect. You may still face challenges, but they won't feel the same, because you're not meeting them with the same energy. You're meeting them with clarity, with coherence, with the quiet power of someone who knows, I may not control what happens, but I absolutely influence how reality responds. This is why presence matters. This is why the pause matters. Not because it changes the event, but because it shifts the signal you're emitting into the space around it. And when enough people learn to live this way, to hold themselves with compassion, to choose stillness over reactivity, to anchor into the frequency they want to live in before asking the world to meet them, there we change more than our own lives. We begin to change the collective field. We become coherence in a world of static. So if you're wondering why your outer world keeps repeating certain patterns, don't just look out there. Look inward. What emotion are you sending? What frequency are you repeating? You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to feel high vibe all the time. You just have to notice. And from that noticing, choose again. Even one deep breath of presence is a recalibration. Even one act of forgiveness shifts your frequency. And the field feels it. That's how powerful you are, even when you feel powerless. You are in conversation with the universe all the time. And it is always listening. Not with ears, but with energy. So speak clearly. Not with your voice, but with your vibration. Choose love not for them, but for you. Feel peace, not because life is perfect, but because you've remembered where peace really begins. And trust that the field, this silent, living mirror, is already responding. 6. You're not just healing yourself. You're affecting the collective. Most of us begin the journey inward, thinking it's only about us. We want to feel better. We want the anxiety to quiet down, the sadness to soften, the anger to stop spinning. We want to reclaim something we feel we've lost. Maybe peace, maybe joy, maybe just the ability to breathe without waiting for the next wave of pain. And that's okay. That's where it starts. But as you keep going, as the layers begin to peel back and you start making space inside for things you used to run from, something quietly profound begins to reveal itself. You were never healing in isolation, even when it felt like you were. You see, consciousness is not a private thing. It's not confined to your body or your brain. It moves, It communicates, it echoes, and it does so energetically. We live in a shared field. One field, one space of vibration and awareness that we all participate in, whether we realize it or not. And every time you choose differently, every time you step out of a familiar pattern, every time you pause instead of react, every time you offer kindness where there used to be defense, you're not just changing your own experience, you're updating the field for everyone. I know that might sound abstract at first, but you felt it. You've been in the presence of someone who didn't say much, yet made you feel completely safe. Someone whose calm helped you settle, whose centeredness invited you back into your own. That's not coincidence. That's resonance. When one person holds a coherent, loving frequency, it naturally pulls others toward it. Not through force, not through persuasion, but through vibration, through embodiment. This is why your healing matters. Not just because of how it changes your life, but because of how it softens the world around you. It doesn't have to be dramatic. You don't need a platform, a title, or a microphone. Sometimes the greatest healing happens quietly in living rooms, grocery store lines, or during silent drives home. When you break a cycle, when you respond with love instead of anger, when you stay present, instead of shutting down, you're showing the people around you, often without words, that a new way is possible. Your children feel it. Your partner feels it. Even the stranger next to you in line feels it. They may not know exactly what changed, but they feel different in your presence. Less guarded, less rushed, a little more connected to themselves, simply because you've come home to yourself. And over time, something remarkable begins to happen. You become what some call a tuning fork, a reference point, a quiet invitation to wholeness. Not because you're perfect, but because you've become honest, because you're no longer performing a version of peace, you're practicing it. And in that practice, your nervous system becomes a place of safety for others. I've watched this happen in my own life, not through grand moments, but through small but repeated choices. There was a time when I was reactive, easily thrown off center. I thought my moods were private, but they weren't. They spilled into my relationships, my work, even my breath. And as I began to unravel those patterns, not through force, but through witnessing, I noticed something unexpected. People around me started to shift too. Conversations became more open. Conflicts softened before they escalated. Even people I hadn't seen in years would tell me, "There's something different about you now." And it wasn't that I had fixed anything. It was that I had returned to something quieter, truer, more grounded than all the defenses I used to wear. That's the gift of personal healing. It's never just personal. It's ancestral. It's energetic. It's collective. When you choose to face the pain your parents never could, when you stop repeating the reactions your culture normalized, when you show up with softness where you once had armor, you're changing more than your own path. You're altering the direction of the stream itself for those who came before you, and those who will come after. And yes, it can feel invisible, thankless, even lonely at times. But know this, the energy you shift inside ripples far beyond what you can see. It opens doors you'll never walk through, for people you'll never meet, in places your name will never be spoken. That's how big this is. That's how much you matter. So, the next time you feel like your healing is insignificant, or too slow, or only benefiting you, remember, every moment you choose presence over pattern, every time you return to love when fear would be easier, you're not just healing a self, you're healing a field. And that field is all of us. 7. The pause between stimulus and response is where you become a creator. We're rarely taught to pause. We're taught to react, to defend, to fix, to respond immediately, to fill silence, to prove we're right, to keep things moving. In a world obsessed with speed, stillness can feel like failure. But somewhere along the way, usually after enough chaos, enough regrets, enough moments where we said or did something we didn't mean, we begin to wonder, is there another way to live? And there is. It begins with one simple, often overlooked truth. Between the moment something happens and the moment you respond, there's a space. And that space is where your power lives. Most of us don't notice it. We've been conditioned to move too fast, to skip over it, to go from trigger to reaction without ever checking in with ourselves. A text message comes through, and before we breathe, we feel offended. A partner says something with the wrong tone, and before we reflect, we raise our voice. Someone pulls ahead in traffic, and before we blink, we're angry. It all happens so quickly, it feels automatic, but it's not. It's just unconscious. And here's the beautiful part. Consciousness changes everything. The moment you notice the space, even just for a breath, you realize something profound. You don't have to respond the way you always have. You don't have to carry forward every habit, every script, every old story. You can choose something new. Not because you've suddenly become enlightened, but because you've become aware. And awareness is the beginning of freedom. I remember one time years ago, when someone I loved said something that would have normally sent me into a tailspin. But instead of reacting, I paused. I felt the familiar heat rising, the script trying to play out. But something in me just said, wait. I stepped away, took a breath, put my hand over my heart, and asked, what am I really feeling right now? The answer surprised me. It wasn't rage. It was hurt. It was fear. It was an old story of not being seen. And suddenly, I wasn't in a battle with them anymore. I was standing with a younger version of myself who just needed love. That moment didn't just change the conversation. It changed me, because I didn't follow the old road. I made a new one. And that's what it means to become a creator. Not someone who controls the world, but someone who reclaims their own presence in the middle of it, someone who stops the pattern and starts a new possibility. We tend to think that in order to change our lives, we need big shifts, new jobs, new cities, new relationships. But the truth is, the most radical transformation often happens in the smallest of moments, in a pause, in a breath, in choosing not to react the way you always have. Because when you shift your response even by a degree, you alter the path forward. The outcome bends, the energy shifts, the story changes. It's like changing the angle of a sailboat by just a few degrees. At first, you barely notice it, but hours later, you're in a completely different part of the ocean. And that's how real healing works. Not in leaps, but in inches, in quiet decisions made in the space where no one's watching. So if today brings you a moment, even just one, where you feel yourself about to react in the old way, I invite you to pause, even for 2 seconds, even for one deep breath. You don't have to say anything profound. You don't have to get it right. You just have to interrupt the pattern. Because once you see that you have a choice, the pattern starts to lose its grip. And the real you, the aware you, starts to emerge. You begin to live from the inside out, instead of outside in. You begin to trust that peace isn't about having a perfect life. It's about having space inside your life to respond instead of react. And you begin to realize you don't have to change the world today. You just have to change the way you meet it. That's the work. That's the miracle. And it's available in the pause. 8. Inner silence is the bridge to infinite energy. There's a kind of knowing that doesn't come through thinking. It doesn't arrive wrapped in logic or language. It doesn't knock on your door with loud explanations or neatly typed answers. It's quieter than that. So quiet, in fact, that most people miss it, simply because they're never still enough to hear. But it's always there underneath the noise, beneath the stories, the self-talk, the to-do lists, the planning, the remembering, the worrying, beneath the constant hum of What should I say? Or what should I do next? And if you've ever been through something that forced you to stop, not just slow down, but stop, you may have touched it. That silence? Not the absence of sound, but the presence of something deeper. It's the place where everything inside you becomes still, even if just for a moment, where your breath softens and the need to figure it all out disappears. You're not lost. You're not broken. You're just here. And for the first time, that's enough. Most of us don't realize how loud we've become inside. How much of our inner life is just recycled thoughts, the same old fears, the same old reactions, looping day after day like background music we've forgotten how to turn off. But none of that is you. Those are patterns, echoes, worn-out grooves carved by years of trying to be safe, to be liked, be successful, be someone. The real you is underneath all of that, and silence is how you get there. I don't mean silence as in don't speak. I mean the silence of being, the kind that arises when you're not trying to prove, not trying to protect, not trying to perform, just here, breathing, aware, alive. There have been times in my life where words failed me, where the pain was too deep, the questions too big, the mind too overwhelmed to think its way through. And in those moments, I found something I didn't know I was looking for. Presence. Not in books, not in theories, but in the quiet that remained when I finally let everything else fall away. I remember sitting by a window once, in the middle of what felt like the unraveling of everything I thought I was. My plans had collapsed. My identity didn't make sense anymore. I didn't know who I was, or where I was headed. But I did something strange that day. I stopped trying to fix it. I stopped trying to escape it. I just sat and breathed. And in that stillness, something began to open, not outside of me, inside. It wasn't a voice. Exactly. It wasn't a vision. It was more like a remembering, a soft awareness that said, "You are not the noise. You are not the chaos. You are the one who sees power. You are the one who breathes. You are the life itself." Quietly watching. That's when I understood. Inner silence is not emptiness. It's connection. It's alignment. It's access to the infinite. Because when the surface calms, when you stop chasing the next thought or the next fix, you tap into something that has no beginning and no end. Call it soul. Call it source. Call it the universe. God. Consciousness. Awareness. The names don't matter. What matters is that you feel it. And you can in the silence. The mind can't grasp it. But your being knows it. It's what remains when the I you think you are becomes quiet enough to simply be. And from that space, energy returns. Clarity returns. Love returns not as an idea, but as a frequency you can feel in your bones. That's why healing isn't about fixing yourself. It's about creating enough stillness to remember that you were never broken. So if you're feeling tired, overwhelmed, disconnected, I won't tell you to try harder. I won't tell you to think your way out. I'll invite you instead to stop, just for a moment, to breathe, to let go of the story, the urgency, the noise, and to listen, not with your ears, but with your presence, because there is a door in you, quiet, steady, always open, and beyond it is the infinite. You don't have to reach for it. You just have to return to it. And when you do, you'll find something more powerful than motivation, more lasting than willpower, more nourishing than achievement. You'll find yourself not as a personality, but as the pulse of life itself. And from that place, you don't have to do anything. You become the thing you've been chasing. 9. You don't need to become someone else to be free. You just need to remember who you are. There's this idea we carry, most of us, quietly, that in order to be free, we have to change. We think we have to be better, smarter, stronger, more disciplined, more healed, less emotional, more enlightened, less us. We carry a belief often unspoken, but deeply embedded, that we are somehow not enough, not yet. That if we could just evolve into the right version of ourselves, then we'd finally feel free, finally feel safe, finally feel whole. But what if I told you that's not how it works? That freedom doesn't come from becoming someone else. It comes from remembering who you've always been. Not the version of you shaped by expectation or fear. Not the version edited to fit in, to please, to survive. But the original version, the one that came before the world told you who you had to be. You see, real freedom doesn't come from mastering your circumstances. It comes from no longer letting your circumstances define you. You don't become free by controlling the outer world. You become free when the outer world no longer tells you who you are. It's easy to forget. The world is loud. It hands you labels from the moment you arrive. Your gender, your role, your past, your achievements, your failures. It teaches you to identify with your wounds, with your resume, with your reputation, with your trauma, and over time, you start to shrink into those shapes. You forget that those things are not you. They are just costumes you were asked to wear. But beneath all of that, beneath the layers of roles and reactions, there is something in you that hasn't changed. Something that never needed fixing. Something that can't be broken. Some people call it soul. Some call it essence. Some simply call it presence. Whatever name you give it, it's not a thing you create. It's who you are when you're not trying to be anything. And the beauty is, you don't have to chase it. You just have to remember it. Not with your mind, but with your being. Not by telling yourself who you are, but by feeling it. By resting into the part of you that's always been quietly watching. The part that doesn't rise or fall with your successes or your failures. The part that didn't disappear when they left. Or when life broke your heart. That part is still here. Still steady. Still whole. Covered. Maybe by years of noise. And forgetting, but never gone. Like the sun behind clouds. It's always been shining. You just forgot to look up. That's what real awakening feels like. Not becoming more, but remembering you are not less. It's not a grand transformation. It's not a firework moment where you suddenly feel invincible. It's quieter than that. Gentler. It's the feeling you get when you stop fighting yourself. When you stop asking, "How do I fix me?" and instead whisper, "Who was I?" before I believed I was broken. And in that whisper you return, not to some perfect version of yourself, but to the one that was never lost in the first place. That's when freedom begins. Not when the world changes, but when your relationship to yourself becomes true again. Because when you remember who you are, really remember. With your breath, with your bones, the things that once had power over you begin to fall away. Other people's opinions. They become just weather. Unpredictable. Passing. Irrelevant to the sky you are. Your fears. They may still show up, but they don't drive the car anymore. You start hearing them for what they are. Echoes from a time you didn't know your own strength. And pain. It still comes. But now, it moves through a space so spacious, so rooted, that it no longer defines you. Because you remember, you are not the storm. You are the space the storm passes through. You are not here to become someone else. You are here to come home to yourself. And in that home, no one and no thing can take your freedom. Because it never came from outside you. It came from the truth that you are already whole, already enough, already free. You were just waiting to remember. You're not here to endure the pain. You're here to remember who you are. You weren't born to suffer through this life. You weren't sent here to toughen up, to get used to heartbreak, or to spend your days bracing against the next wave of pain. You came here to remember, to wake up from the illusion that pain is who you are. There's a difference between feeling pain and being the one who suffers. And once you see that difference, not just in theory, but in your bones, the entire game changes. Because you realize you don't need to keep fighting to survive. You've been trying so hard to hold it all together, the identity, the expectations, the protection, but maybe you were never meant to carry so much weight in the first place. You see, you're not here to learn how to tolerate suffering. You're here to discover that pain loses its grip the moment you stop identifying with the one being hurt. The moment you step back gently, kindly, and witness, not with cold detachment, but with the kind of compassion that says, "Oh, I see you. I see the part of me that's scared. I see the part that wants to run. I see the part that's still waiting for something out there to save me." And in that seeing, you remember you are not those parts. You are the space they rise in. You are the awareness watching. You are the calm beneath the waves. You didn't come to avoid life. You came to be present with it, to see it for what it really is. A mirror, not a punishment, not a test, not a maze to escape from. Just a mirror. Everything outside is reflecting something inside, not to shame you, but to show you, not to define you, but to invite you deeper. And you didn't come to find someone else to save you. You came to remember the part of you that was never lost to begin with. That light you've been searching for in other people, in their approval, in their love, in their reassurance. It's been yours all along. You are the answer. You are the presence you've been aching to feel. The truth is, you don't need to strive anymore. Not to prove, not to heal faster, not to earn rest. From today on, you can begin not by effort, but by allowing, by softening into yourself, by choosing ease over tension, stillness over resistance, breath over control. You don't need to fight the waves. You can become the ocean, not as a metaphor, but as a lived reality. The ocean doesn't flinch when a storm passes through. It doesn't contract. It simply holds everything, the calm and the chaos within its vastness. You can live like that too, not by closing your heart, but by expanding it. Not by isolating yourself from the world, but by walking through it as someone who no longer fears being hurt. Because once you remember who you are, once you know, in your quiet moments, that you are the observer, the chooser, the creator, you become untouchable. Not because nothing difficult ever happens again, but because you stop abandoning yourself when it does. From that moment on, no one and no thing can truly harm you, because you've stopped handing them the power to define you. So as we end this conversation, I invite you not to try harder, but to listen more gently, to soften your grip on who you think you need to be, and return to that deep inner knowing that has always lived in you. You are not broken. You are not behind. You are not too much or too little. You are enough, not because you earned it, but because you are it. You are the breath. You are the stillness. You are the awareness watching the movie, not the character stuck in the scene. So today, step out of the scene. Let the roles fall away. Let the performance go quiet. And come home. Because from this place, you're not surviving anymore. You're remembering. And once you remember, you'll never forget again.